Hey everybody, I'm Barney Taylor. Welcome back to In the Record Room, the show for all things vinyl and all things soul. And I am so excited today. Look who's here with me, DJ collector and promoter, DJ Honey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Barney. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. It's really exciting. We share a mutual friend, don't we, Paul Davis?
We do. Yes, so I met Paul. I met him online, as all the greatest relationships begin.
Yeah.
And so I was going to Cleethorpes in 2017.
Yeah.
And in the months leading up to that, I was joining some Cleethorpes groups and some UK Northern Soul groups because I wanted to hear the kind of sounds that I was going to be hearing at Cleethorpes.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I honestly don't know how this happened, and it's a bit of a strange story. But I ended up requesting to join Dubliners Go to Cleethorpes or something like that.
That well-known Facebook group.
And really, like, up my alley because I was nay a Dubliner, but I was going to Cleethorpes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next morning, I had this message from Paul saying, "Hey, do you live in Ireland? And do you live in Dublin?" And I said, "No." And I thought, who is this strange person messaging me about whether I live in Dublin or not? And then I looked back on what I had done, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry for trying to join your group. I'm not trying to impose in the thing that you've got going on." And then he said, and he was so lovely about it. I was genuinely frightened.
Yeah.
That I had intruded on something. And so then he was so super lovely, and we ended up talking. He said, "Oh, so are you going to Cleethorpes?" And I said yes. And he said, "Oh, a bunch of us go every year," and he tells me the story, and it was just so beautiful to hear his passion for the event and just his passion for the music. And he's become a really great friend, and as I said, such a champion for me and my DJing career. And through that, he started listening to my radio show that I have, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yeah.
And he put my name forward to A.D. Croasdale for a spot at Cleethorpes, and I had a spot at Cleethorpes, which was just amazing.
Fabulous, fabulous. No, Cleethorpes is a massive thing here. As you know, I did a Cleethorpes special the other week with a few of the guys, and Paul has just basically, he's been a champion of this show as well, and he was the first ever guest in the record room, and ever since he's helped me grow the subscribers. He's just a genuinely nice guy, and one of the things I've loved about this is meeting nice people, and I'm sure you have experienced that as well. There's something about a global community of soul fans that really just generates warmth and love and passion and all of those kind of things, which is why I'm really pleased that you're on the show, because you're kind of a new addition to this story. But with the Cleethorpes connection, we'll come back to Cleethorpes because I'm going to ask you the sort of things you would have played, but I need to take you back to the beginning and ask you, where did your love of soul music first begin?
Well, I've been thinking about how to answer this question, actually, and it's really difficult to pinpoint one specific moment where it happened. So I suppose it was just an overlapping of all these influences that brought me to that. So it started when I was a young girl. I loved black and white films, so Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire and Bing Crosby and Judy Garland. Judy Garland is still my favorite female vocalist of all time. Yeah. And then that got me into crooners, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett. And around this time also, my mum would take my brother and I to the library all the time. And so all I was doing was renting out books about decades from the 40s to the 60s, and whatever was in them I needed to know. And, you know, I was still about 8 years old. I wasn't some intellectual teenager or anything. It was just this little kid flicking through these pictures and reading about the politics and the fashion and the times that were changing and the music. And so then that brought me to Elvis Presley, because I mean, he's the icon of that era, really. But in my deep love that I fell head over heels in love with Elvis, I started reading about his influences, and I don't know if it was because I took a deep dive into his life and everything about him. Some people might call it an obsession. I call it a infatuation.
Look, if you're going to be obsessed by someone, no better person. What a life and what a contribution to kind of global culture, really.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't know if I was really lucky, or like I said, it was because I took such a deep dive into his life that I didn't so much read the whitewashing of his music. I read his deep appreciation and respect for the artists that inspired him. And so that's how I got to learn a lot about the Black American rhythm and blues artists of that era. You know, Big Mama Thornton did the original Hound Dog, and so then he did it, and he loved Laverne Baker and Ruth Brown. And so that got me onto the Atlantic label. And the Atlantic label was probably the very first label that I really, really liked and got into. And at the same time as this was going on, I learned about Dusty Springfield, and I bought my very first record, which was a Dusty Springfield LP. And I just loved her look, her makeup and her hair and her gowns, and I loved her sound. And so then I started reading a lot about Dusty and her influences, which were Motown. And so at the same time, I was falling in love with Atlantic rhythm and blues and Detroit Motown. And so I just listened to Motown and Atlantic religiously for years. And then I remember one time it was suggested to me that I should listen to Junior Walker and the All-Stars Shotgun album. And I was like, oh, you know, I've been listening to Motown. I know Motown, you know, it's great, but I'm really after something a little bit more. Anyway, I listened to this album and it changed my life, because it was the first time I'd really heard jazz, rhythm and blues and soul music together in one thing. And it just blew my mind, and it changed the way I listened to music. And so then I thought, there is so much I'm missing out on that I need to know.
So
I mean, the obsession went further. And so I guess that was, I mean, even though I'd been listening to soul music through Motown and the like, definitely that album changed the way I approached everything I was looking for and listening to. And then maybe around that time as well, I was given my very first Northern Soul CD. And I remember reading, it was a burnt CD, and the track list had been handwritten and photocopied probably 100 times. And I remember thinking, you know, I don't really know any of these artists. I feel like this person has perhaps read me wrong. Like, they know it's soul, they know I'm into soul, but I don't know any of these people on this CD. Maybe it's not really my thing. Anyway, I put it on, and it had, I think the one of the first tracks on there was World Column So Is the Sun. And it just that beat and the fact that it was an instrumental, I was already kind of really digging instrumentals after Junior Walker. And it also had Willie Mitchell, the Champion, on there, and it had Goodnight Irene, the originals, and Linda Jones, I Just Can't Live My Life Without You. And I just thought, you know, what have I been doing with my life before this? It was just phenomenal, that music, and you know, things haven't changed too much.
And so that was that moment. But like, I mean, your story is beautifully original to you, but also wonderfully communal, isn't it? That people get into not the easiest stuff, but the more accessible stuff like the Motown or the Atlantic, which is a fabulous label. But then suddenly you are presented with a Kent album or a compilation of soul, and then you start, because we're all curious as humans, you start digging deeper. Who is this track? What else have they done? Who was it produced by? What record label? So was that the moment at which you started buying differently? Or collecting? Did it inspire your collecting?
I think actually, no. You know, I had this CD.
Good question there, you see.
Yeah, I had this CD.
Yeah.
And then I was given I think I was given 2 more of the same kind of catalog. I don't know what it was. I don't even know I honestly to this day don't know what box set or what the name of the actual CD was, or whether it was just somebody had compiled a mix. I don't know. So I was given 2 more of these CDs, and even though I thought they were just the best thing I've ever heard, I just thought that was it. And I was just in my own little bubble listening to these 3 CDs anywhere and everywhere I could. I didn't know that there was a Northern Soul scene. I didn't know that other people were listening to this stuff. You know, it didn't even really trigger me into, and it was kind of, I mean, the internet was around, but it was still kind of before everyone used the internet for everything.
Yeah.
And so I was just really content just listening to these CDs. Yeah. And then certainly when I was out record shopping, I would know more and look in, and wouldn't just be buying, you know, Elvis and Dusty Springfield LPs anymore. I started branching out. So yeah.
No, but it's interesting to me because like there's always a moment at which people branch out from. So where did you go from? So you're starting to buy. How did you go into more advanced collecting? Did you start thinking was there a point at which you thought I'm going to try and find some of these things, or I'm going to start buying different things?
So after, so I think it's kind of, it links up with the night I discovered my first Northern Soul night.
Perfect. That's a great story.
I was from a pretty uninspiring town, I like to call it. And I was at a pub, and this pub was notorious for bikie gangs. So leather clad, big insignia and patches, and Harley Davidsons parked out, a line of Harley Davidsons out the front. And I was underage as well.
We won't tell anyone.
And so anyway, so I was just grateful for being able to be drinking in a pub, I think. Yeah. So beggars can't be choosers.
No, not at all.
Anyway, hanging out there, and then I went to go to the bathroom, and I was walking down this hallway, and I could hear this beat, a subtle beat in the background, and I thought, oh, that sounds so much like a soul song or a soul record or whatever, and I thought, no way is that going to be played here in this town. And so anyway, I got closer to this room, and it was a private function room, and I got to the door, or this back door, and I could hear the beat, and I thought, it really is. And so then I just, I peeked through the door, and I tell you, I saw one of the best sights of my entire life up until that point, a room full of white 50-odd-year-olds shuffling around to soul music. It was the most glorious sight of my life.
Wow.
And so then the rest of the night, I mean, I thought it was just a private function or a wedding or something. Yeah. It looked like that. And the rest of the night I was going to and from, but I kept sneaking back to that door to hear like what they were playing next. And I remember the very first record that when I first peeked through that door was the Contours' Baby Hit and Run.
Oh,
and I was just like, I know this song. And, you know, growing up in this town, I didn't know any of the music that was usually being played at the bars and pubs. So in that little moment, I felt like I had found my people in this room full of older people.
That's fabulous. I mean, while you were talking, I could imagine this was like a scene from a film or something, as someone creeping down a corridor and then moving closer to this beat. So how did you try and then join this community or get involved, or did you start asking questions, or?
Yeah, so I left them to it because, again, I thought it was a private function. Yeah. And I remember speaking to my parents a few days later saying, you would never guess what happened the other night. I was out at this pub and they were playing Northern Soul. And my parents just really coolly said, oh yeah, that's the Mandra Soul Club or something. And I was like, really? You guys knew about this? You've been holding this out on me?
You didn't tell me.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I was still underage, so maybe they were just being responsible parents.
I'm sure they were being.
I was just so shocked that they knew all along. And then I was actually one of my mum's friends who ran it as well. So I ended up going the following month and just sitting there in awe. And I remember trying to dance like a Northern Souler and then just kind of scrapping that idea because it was too difficult to concentrate. I just wanted to enjoy myself. And so I started going monthly, and I found out about the Irish Club in Perth, which was really the original mecca of Northern Soul in Australia.
Yeah.
And just met some great people and yeah, but so that really started inspiring me about the amount of music that was out there and the amount of passion and availability as well, and that I wasn't really alone in this little bubble. There were other people like me out there. But then I moved even further away from the city to the southernmost tip of Western Australia, which is beautiful. It's actually a really beautiful place, Augusta. And I guess to keep my toes in the water, I started a radio show there on their community radio, and it was called Cadillac Records, which was a tribute to Chess Records, and their little moniker.
Yeah. And
I played 60s soul music. I mean, I played records and I played CDs and MP3s. And you know, the lovely radio station manager bought the record player especially for me and my show, which was really nice of him. So I had that radio show for 2 years, and that's when I started buying a few records and really, I suppose, never having money again.
That's the unwritten story that I encounter every episode. It's the thing nobody ever talks about, which is the obsession which causes you to then, you know, not eat things for a week because you've been saving up for that record or whatever. But this so this is really interesting. And so you started developing a profile, I suppose, by regularly choosing a playlist to share with people, I'm guessing, through the radio show. Where did that take you, or where did you go with that next, or what did it inspire you to do?
Well, I was so far away from population that it was a very remote country seaside town. So I guess and the median age of that town is 67 or something. So I was very popular. My radio show was very popular. And so I just did it. I mean, I didn't really think I was going to do anything with this. All I wanted to do was share my love of this music and the knowledge that I had and the knowledge that I gained through researching my shows. But I had that show for a few years, and then I traveled across Australia to Melbourne and in a van, and stopped off actually at a few soul nights along the way. and then reached Melbourne. And prior to moving to Melbourne, I'd been listening to PBS FM, which is the community radio in station in Melbourne. And I would listen to Vince Peach Soul Time every Wednesday.
Okay.
And he has the longest running soul radio show in the world. And up until recently, we had the longest running weekly soul night in the world too. And so it's always like, oh, when I get to Melbourne, I'm going to go to Cherry Bar. I'm going to see Vince Peach. I'm going to become friends with Vince Peach, and I'm going to dance to his records. And I did all those things. So I started going to every soul night there was in Melbourne, and there were a lot.
I was going to say, is it a massive soul scene?
Yeah, you can go out every night of the week, and not even that, you just go to any bar and they're playing 60s soul music.
Right.
It's just amazing. Even still now, it's just so great. Well, maybe not now, but earlier this year.
Then now, and will be again.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah.
So I just started hearing all of these records, and I started buying more records.
Yeah.
And very quietly collecting. It was never about, I collect records. Can I DJ, or I'm going to DJ one day? It was not that at all. It was just, I love listening to these records at home by myself and just having a great time.
Yeah. So the Melbourne soul scene then was a much bigger place for you to be exposed to even more influences and see people playing music. And then I'm going to ask you how you then did get into playing, because your story is creeping that way, isn't it? From listening to being inspired and then slowly collecting, getting some experience. So how did you start playing? Because that's what you do now, isn't it?
It is. I know it is. My life has taken such a turn, unexpected turn. Yeah. And actually the reason why I did my very first gig was because I had gone through one of many life-altering experiences, and after it I had decided that fear and intimidation were not going to stop me from doing what I wanted and living my life or fulfilling dreams, even though at that point it still wasn't a dream. But I didn't want to have any restrictions on what I could on my potential, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so prior to this, I had been asked a few times by close friends. There's this one soul club, which was my favorite, Melbourne Soul Club, who had a monthly gig at Bayswater Bowls Club, which are just my favorite places to go for soul nights because they're super traditional and the beer is cheap. And I used to borrow my housemate's hatchback and drive there because it was a bit out of the city. You couldn't get public transport. Drive there and then sleep in her car overnight and then drive back home the next day. And so I'd been asked by the organizer of that to DJ a few times, and I politely declined. And then I was asked by another soul club, Southside Soul, which is just south of Melbourne, to DJ, and again I declined. And then this event happened, and it was time for me to take back my power and just do whatever I wanted with my life type thing. And so I got asked again, and this time I said yes. And I got asked by Southside Soul, Big Daddy Warbucks, and DJ Lady Soul, who I have the utmost respect for, both personally and professionally, because they're just beautiful people and really inclusive and just want to have a good time. So I was asked by them, and I did an opening spot and just played whatever records I had, cheapies. And actually I had Shoes by Bobby Bland. That was the most expensive record I had. So
great record though.
I know, right? Yeah. It's so good. I just played a bunch of cheapies and people loved it. And I don't know, I was a little bit surprised by that, but also not, because it's not really me. It's still the record speaking. I mean, I know I put them together, but they're great records. So it's going to sound good.
I think so.
No matter what.
And for you personally, was that a moment where you felt that you had really I don't know, pushed yourself in a new direction? Was it quite a liberating moment for you?
Definitely. I felt very empowered as well. And just like this was something new. There was like a little shining light of something was out there. I still did not expect I was going to do another gig, but I just thought, you know, if I can do this, then, you know, onwards and upwards from here. So then I was asked back by Southside Soul. The very next gig I did was a fundraiser for a charity supporting survivors of domestic violence.
Right.
And so that was very close to my heart at the time and now still. And so I thought, you know, and I was invited to DJ at that. And so it was such a incredible moment for me, to knowing what I had been through, and then to be there sharing this passion of mine that I had had for so many years, and doing it for other women and people on the dance floor, and just sharing what I loved for a really good cause. And the lineup was an all-female DJ lineup. And it was the first time I had properly seen women DJing. I mean, up until that point, there was maybe only one female DJ, soul DJ in Australia, and they usually get like the first spot or a really kind of uninspiring spot. And this time I saw all these women DJing, filling a dance floor and having fun. There was no ego there. There was no competition. It wasn't about being the coolest or having the most expensive records. It was just about having a great time. And so I thought, I mean, that probably sparked another thing in me, I think, where I thought, you know, it could be like this. It could be like this. And
well, it has turned out like that, hasn't it, in some ways? So look, this is such a thrilling story, though, because it's about that moment where we go from our bubble to seeing that actually there is a universality to this, where it does bring people together. Music allows people to overcome and to unite and to come together. And also, as you say, it's incredibly empowering. I mean, it must have been amazing that night when with the lineup you're describing. What came out of that? Or how did you then keep pushing? Because it sounds to me like you had a fire burning then, and you wanted to keep pushing.
So again, I am just still really lucky and grateful and privileged as to how everything has panned out, because you know, there are other people that DJ a spot and it doesn't turn out the way that my life has so far. So the very next gig I did was with Vince Peach. He invited me to DJ on New Year's Eve in Melbourne.
The
at
ultimate
Cherry Bar.
then. The ultimate for you.
That was a full circle moment. And you know, I thought, I'm DJing with Vince Peach at Cherry Bar in Melbourne. Life will not get better than this moment. And it was just amazing. You know, that's one of the biggest nights of the year. I mean, it is the biggest night of the year. And I was DJing at this place that I'd lusted over before I'd even gotten to Melbourne, over this guy who I had idolized. And I did the spot from 1 a.m. till 5 a.m. and all my friends were there supporting me and just dancing, and it was incredible.
I could see from the expression on your face when you're even telling the story now, how amazing it must have been for you. Because as you say, you didn't set out for this to happen, but it sounds to me like once one thing happened, once you told yourself you were no longer going to be held back, I'm not going to be held back any longer. It's almost as if you became your own catalyst and developed your own momentum, and then things fell into place. Now, we're going to come back to all of this because I'm absolutely entranced. But you know, also at the same time, I've asked you to choose records, haven't I? So what I'm thinking is this would be a great time for you to tell us what the first record you've chosen. I mean, I'm wondering whether it has a relationship with your burgeoning career anyway.
It does. It's it really does. It's like you've read my mind.
Oh, well then, please, just take it away. What's your first record?
All right. So it is Barbara Lynn, I'm a Good Woman.
Oh, I love that. I love that record.
I know, it's an anthem.
Yeah.
So I bought this record shortly after I first started DJing, and the lyrics very much echoed what I had been going through, so I related to it for that reason. But also, I love how Barbara Lynn writes the lyrics, as she did with many of her songs, which makes it phenomenal. But the lyrics go from her being a victim to then being the hero of her own story and saying a change is going to come. Yeah. And it just really encapsulated everything that I was about in that moment. Yeah. And I love the drum roll, and I love at the beginning it really summons the dance floor.
Absolutely. I'm getting goosebumps while you're describing it.
And then the beat is like a call to action, a march almost. And even the breaks, it's kind of a bit like a boxing match, you know, like a few jabs and then a bit of a KO moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and every time I play this, the floor fills, and I love seeing women on the dance floor. Yeah. Just loving the moment and singing out the lyrics that they're a good woman, and pointing to other good women, and even men also celebrating women in that moment and saying, yeah, you're a good woman, and we all love good women, and that kind of thing. And it's just it's a really, really special moment every time I hear or play this record.
Look, I'm with you on this fully. Also, it's so joyously defiant, isn't it? It's a real kind of like, here I am, and this is me, and no more, as you say, no more victim. I'm a good woman. It's genuinely getting goosebumps hearing you describe it. And I can picture it because, like, you know, it gets played in Dublin, and a few people have it. And every single time you can see people singing the opening as well. And it's kind of like, while everybody, as you say, call to action on the floor, and then boom, like that, and it drags you with it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an entrancing record, and really just grabs you but grabs one another. You know, you take everyone with you with this record. It's not you by yourself.
No, No, I think that's absolutely essential, because, as you said earlier, it's in some ways it's not about you. You're just choosing which records to play for the audience, but also at the same time, because of your personal passion, you're injecting that into the records you've bought and chosen and are choosing to play, and then that's what connects you with the dance floor. Because we've all been at events where the DJ, for whatever reason, isn't connecting with a dance floor.
Yes,
but that's essential. I mean, in you know, for you, it must be part of what got you into it, seeing that connection, but also developing that connection, especially from a feminist perspective and all of that kind of stuff, really pushing that. So let's keep going about how this kind of act of personal defiance, I guess, keeps pushing you forward to where you are now, because you are incredibly busy now. I know there's the lockdown thing, but you have you have a great big digital footprint, don't you? So we can perhaps talk about how you're moving through and developing this, and you've played all around the world as well, haven't you?
I have, yes. I've been very fortunate to do that. So I think after Melbourne, I guess the next big step for me career-wise was I moved to Queensland and moved to Brisbane. Yeah. And I wanted to get, you know, I knew I was going to be there for a couple of years, or at least. And so I wanted to immediately try and get back into the community. And, you know, I was leaving a big support network in Melbourne. So I wanted to try and get involved with the community in Brisbane and build rapport and friendships. So I started volunteering at the community radio station there, 4ZZZ FM. And then I applied for a radio show, and that's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is still going today, not on 4ZZZ anymore. And so that radio show was, so that radio show is a 100% female fronted artists. And
that's
records.
what I wanted to hear. So can you talk to me about the impulse about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and its kind of, you know, reason that you've created this? Because it's all women singers, isn't it?
Yeah. So the reason behind it, I guess, was again that defiance, like you say, of not having our voices muted, not having women's voices muted, and really amplifying them, and the great records that they produce that often get ignored or sidelined. I mean, even researching the show, I find it really difficult to find research on the majority of the records, but then I type in some really random male from the 50s, and there's pages and pages about him. And I also remember distinctly, I had visited my parents in Western Australia, and I was catching an Uber to the airport, and it's like an hour and a half drive, and there was and the guy had a radio station on the whole time, and there was, throughout that 1 hour and 30 minutes, there was one female artist played on that radio station. And sure, it was a mainstream, I don't know, popular radio station, but it just really highlighted to me the lack of exposure that female artists get even today. So that I went back to the radio station. I said, this is my idea for the show. And it ticked a lot of boxes for the radio station, of course. And and so it was the only radio station, only radio show on 4ZZZ that was 100% vinyl. And so that was really special to everyone there, and for me as well, to introduce to them. And I just made lots of friends, and also radio is a great advertisement, I suppose. So by having the radio station, it got me a lot of gigs as well. And so I was gigging a lot in Brisbane, and everything was going great there too.
So how long has Kiss Kiss Bang Bang been running? Because it's still going now, isn't it?
So now it's moved. It was weekly, and now it's monthly, and it's on Mixcloud. It's been going since 2015, I think.
Wow! So that's So alongside the endurance, alongside the defiance, there's endurance, isn't there? There's which is important, because we're in this world of everything being online. It's really hard to keep content ticking over, isn't it? Because there's so much demand that it must be. There's a lot of pressure to make sure you've got the next show, and then you keep your audience, because it's very hard to keep an audience if you've got 3 shows in a row and then you miss 3 weeks. They've moved on. So is there a pressure for you to keep it going? Or
I don't know if I'd describe it as a pressure. It's I don't know, I really enjoy doing it. Because for me, I would be doing everything in preparation for it anyway. I'd be listening to music, I'd be buying records, I'd be researching the records, and then I'd be researching the records that I just bought to find more records. So for me, it just is kind of a result of what I was already doing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And also, if you're as passionate as you are about it, you're going to do it anyway. I mean, and there's no two ways.
Of the listenership.
You're not going to just go, I'm not passionate anymore. I don't care. So, but the fact of it continuing, and the fact of it means that it's now an archive or a presence online of, which is this furtherance of this defiance in many ways. Because I mean, it's also about imbalance, isn't it? And about trying to redress imbalance, which we see across all stratas of society. And so something, and I'm not going to say small, but I'm going to say something as simple as a list of MP or a timeline of MP3 files being shared regularly is contributing to the furthering of redressing this imbalance, isn't it? I mean, it's important.
And I also wanted to prove to people that you can play female artists and still be a cool or a successful DJ. Because I feel like even in my early days, I did play a lot of male artists, and I just remember one time thinking, what am I doing? You know, like all great records and sounded great, but I just thought the people, the artists and the sounds and the voices that I relate to are women's voices.
Yeah.
And like the dance floor, if you get women up dancing, then you get the guys up, and it's everything's going. And so I thought, you know, women are more likely to dance to female artists.
Yeah.
And so it just, I don't know, I just had this aha moment, and it all just kind of slipped into place. And so and I still do, like I was saying, hear a lot of DJ sets or whatever that are predominantly male. Yeah. And I just wanted to prove to people that you can play female artists and have a really cool set.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because in a community that is all about inclusion and all about everybody being equal under the 3 minutes of a record, it's funny that you still have to try and prove that point in some ways. You would imagine in some ways it would be a given.
Yeah, I know, but I kind of figured it out that it comes from the fact that most of the DJs, I mean, I'm just going to talk about the Northern Soul scene.
That's fine.
Most of the DJs are, and so to them, obviously, they're going to relate more to a male voice. And then it becomes this kind of snowball effect where more male DJs just play more male records. And then any listeners or punters or dancers, if they want to buy records, they're only going to hear these male ones and be influenced by them and then go out and buy male ones. And then it's just this perpetual cycle. So I suppose one way to rectify that would be having more females on the lineup.
Is to defiantly change it. I mean, what sort of feedback have you had from this deliberate policy in terms of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang? How has it been received?
I've had an overwhelming positive response. Yeah. I was a little bit nervous, and I shouldn't have been, but I was a little bit nervous at the beginning. You know, people saying, "Oh, you're only playing women artists. That's sexist," and all of those ridiculous comments that women receive. But I haven't had any of that. And I've just had so many people support me. And then moving from Brisbane and the 4ZZZ in-house radio show, moving to Singapore in 3 years ago, I was a little bit hesitant as to how it would be received online, because it would then go to a global audience, and would my Brisbane listeners still tune in? Would people internationally tune in? You know, I was really nervous, and I took a couple of months off to settle and for my records to arrive, and then I just kind of got bored not sharing music again. So I started doing the Mixcloud, and it's just been onwards and upwards since then.
A further act of defiance in many ways, just to kind of keep, I don't want to keep laboring this point, but there are always themes to people's stories, aren't there? And there's that moment at which you just said to yourself, no more. I'm going to do this. And then it's continued. Now, this thing about moving brings me on to, I was doing, you're very Googleable. I've used this as a word where you can...
Really?
Well, there's a lot that's... I was going to ask you a question. I'll ask you about your second record in a moment, but I was going to ask you a question because once you move, and one of the stories you're talking about is moving, you've played in a lot of places around the world, haven't you, I think? So I was going to ask you to name, it's hard to do, but are there a couple of places you've played outside of Australia that have been really important or special, or you've just loved playing? Maybe that is, if that's not too hard a question, maybe you might be able to...
It's not hard at all. I'm constantly gushing about these places and the music that I hear there. So living in Singapore, it's a great location to live for hopping around Southeast Asia and Asia, much like the UK and Europe, I suppose. So when I first arrived here, I had a gig as I announced I was coming over and moving here. Singapore Soul Club invited me to DJ within like the first month of me being here, pretty much once my records arrived. And that was amazing. Such a great welcome to this new country where I thought I was going to have to give up my regular gigs and I'd never DJ again and all of this jazz.
And what's the scene like in Singapore?
It's small. but it's passionate. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's nice. And then my second gig was in Kuala Lumpur. I was invited by this Kuala Lumpur soul club to go there. They're having this event. They'd love me. And I was even like, how do you even know who I am? You know, what? And it was just super exotic to me and just so out of my thinking that I'd move to Singapore and then be going to Kuala Lumpur to DJ. And the people there, it's really lovely. So I'm always really grateful for that very initial, quick welcoming into this new area of living and new lifestyle. But some of my favorite places where I have DJ'd are Jakarta in Indonesia. There's a Jakarta Soul Club there, and I just love the sound. They play a lot of mod jazz and northern soul there, all on original records, and they're just super passionate. When you go there for an event, you spend the day riding around on scooters. There's about 100 scooters, and I don't know if you've ever been to Jakarta or even just read about their traffic situation.
No, I haven't. Tell me quickly. Come on, about the traffic.
Very congested, heaps of jams, and very polluted. So there's just cars everywhere. And so I thought, you know, how is this going to work with 100 vintage scooters in this? We're not going to get anywhere. And it's like 37 degrees. We're in the sun. Anyway, but they just scoot around and they're all wearing parkas in this hot weather. And it's just amazing. And then you go get changed, maybe go to the event, and the dancing is unlike anything I've ever seen before and probably will ever see again. They're doing big air splits and backdrops and really athletic old school northern soul dancing. And, you know, I'm just standing there and I can feel the sweat trickling down my spine. And they're dancing in a 3-piece suit, just whizzing around the place and not even breaking a sweat. So it's just really impressive. I love the vibe there. But another place that I super love is Japan. I think Japan on a global northern soul sphere is where it's at.
It's a massive scene, isn't it? I think.
And like everything that the Japanese do, they do it with 110% passion. So it's called Nude Restaurant, but the place that it's held at is called Jim Jam Cafe, and they've been running for like 20 years or something. And Kev Daj goes there regularly. He's like their god. And so the event starts at 7, and by 7:30 the place is filled. Everyone's dancing, and they don't stop until the end. The quality of records is like, I've never heard anything like it before. I don't think I knew about 90% of them. They were just so incredible. I mean, they started with the doors open at 7 p.m. with Sheree Taylor, Ring My Bell. And no one was even in the room. They just it's just their fluffer record. And
in other venues that would have been saved for a long time.
That would have been saved. So it was just amazing, and the hospitality there was incredible. I received a big bouquet of flowers and a handwritten card for DJing with them, and we went out for ramen afterwards, and it was just really, really lovely. But another highlight was also Cleethorpes in 2017.
Well,
so,
I tell you what, go on, tell me the Cleethorpes story. Go on. Go on.
All right. So went there. Paul, obviously, as we said earlier, helped to get me the spot, which I'm forever grateful for. And, you know, to be on the lineup with AD and Butch and Mick H, all of those legends, was just an incredible experience. And it was my birthday as well on the day of my set. So it was
what did you play? Can you remember what you played, or a couple of bits that you played?
Yeah, I played a little bit more R&B stuff. So I remember playing a French version of Unchain My Heart, and I played Freddie Scott, I'll Be Gone. And I played Don't Give Me Love by what is her name? Anyway,
Yeah.
I played Don't Knock It by Sinner Strong.
Yeah.
Just really R&B stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, that then going to Cleethorpes, having developed this relationship and worried that you had intruded upon a community that you weren't sure about. I'm assuming that when you got there, it was as if you'd always been there. And everybody was just kind of like, look, it doesn't matter. It's just about the music and the vinyl and stuff. So, I mean, that would have been a long way from where you began, I suppose.
Yes.
Holiday camp on some coast in the north of England or something. But I'm assuming that it was just part of your journey and your story.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been incredibly lucky. I don't like to use the word luck because I think we make our own luck. But
I think so.
Just fortunate and that I've met the right people who have helped me out along the way and put my name forward for things that I would never have put my name forward for.
But I think that's part of it, isn't it? Listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to talk about your second record, and then I'm going to pick up on some of the other things that you are doing at the moment. And I'm going to ask you how you've been managing since you can't play out. So, but first off, what's your second record? What have you chosen as your second record?
Okay, so this record, when I had my radio show in Western Australia, my very first radio show, and I remember one day selecting what songs I was going to play, what my playlist for that week's radio show, and I was sat out the back of my house in the grass with the wooden table chairs underneath the gum tree, very Australian. and this was on that very first Northern Soul CD I got, track 8. I would always skip forward to this. And it's Roy Hamilton, Cracking Up Over You.
Oh, nice. Okay.
This is the Jamaican pressing record of the record. And this for me just epitomizes what Northern Soul is.
Yeah.
I just love it. It's probably not my style or my sound, but when I'm playing like a proper Northern Soul set, this definitely in the mix. Yeah. And I mean, I didn't get this until last year. So I waited, I think 8 years until the stars aligned and I managed to get it. And so it was always, I remember when I was sitting at that table under that tree, I thought, if I ever get Roy Hamilton, Cracking Up Over You on 45, I've made it as a Northern Soul record collector.
There you go. 8 years later. And but that's part of the passion though, isn't it? Wanting and waiting. And every time I talk to people, so much of this is about, because you could have bought a reissued version of that for $3, but there's no joy in that. I mean, we had this conversation. It has to be the thing, doesn't it? Not a photocopy of the thing. It has to be. And perhaps you might talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have this, it's a very controversial subject, isn't it? Because there's a lot of people out there that think, well, we just want to hear the music. The music should be heard and shared. And sure, I agree with that. But then I think that's the difference between a collector and a DJ or a radio person or whatever. As a collector, you don't go and buy reissue stamps or something, or reissue coins. You get, and you start off with like the most basic stamps or whatever and slowly build. And for a collector, I think it's what makes it all worthwhile is when you've waited and hunted and maybe missed out, and then finally you get your hands on it. But also for me, going to gigs, I like to hear people who have also made the same sacrifices and commitments, and then get to play that record, and we get to hear it, and it's something so special.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the club that we run in Dublin, the D8 Soul Club, it is original vinyl only. As you say, well, actually, increasingly, I don't think it's that controversial at all, because the alternative would be to just put in plug your phone into the speakers and put a Spotify playlist.
Because what is the difference?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean,
other than looking a bit cooler.
Well, that's the thing. But I mean, like you, I've been at gigs where someone has played and they've got a record that they may have taken 15 years to find, or there's only 6 copies in the world, and you hear it, and it's such a thrill because you may never hear it again. And there's a
deeper appreciation for it, and it's a magical thing. But then I think unless you are maybe a record collector, you're not going to understand. I mean, it's the same like if someone showed me a book full of stamps, I'd be like, it doesn't really float my boat.
No, but I think also, I mean, and I think it's essential for the scene that it is about authenticity, because then it's also about a further connection with your audience, because you could dance to a pub jukebox or a Laserdisc thing or something like that, but people go to these events because they want to hear records they haven't heard before. So you're describing Nude Restaurant, where the whole night is a discovery, because you're like, what's this, what's that? And but also people want to see the fruits of your passion and your labor and your commitment. So I don't think it's controversial at all, and people will disagree with me, but some of the best nights I've had in a soul club is when you suddenly hear a record that you're never going to hear again, because we had Greg Belson play in Dublin, and he played Willie Dale's Let Your Love Shine, or whatever it is, Let Your Light Shine, and as soon as he played the introduction, everybody stopped, because they knew. I mean, I think he was saying, there's 7 or 8 of them. There's not many of them.
Yeah, I know. It's just insane.
It's such a privilege, isn't it? But then,
absolutely.
But then that's the beauty of what we do, because as you say, it could be stamps, but if it was stamps, or it could be paintings, but if it's a painting, you're not going to buy a photograph of a painting.
No. And, I think where collecting and becoming a successful DJ overlaps is you go and see these hardcore collectors, because you're going to hear records that you won't hear anywhere else, and that's how they get the draw and the pool of the people to come and see them. And so I mean, I think it takes a while to get there. I mean, 80 sets, they're all unreleased things that you will never hear elsewhere. And that's why you travel across the country or across the world to go and see him DJ.
No, but absolutely. I mean, that's the other side of the story, that someone's dedication has lasted for so long. They're still discovering new things. But the other thing about it is it's not selfish. So that people don't discover these things and then don't tell anyone. They're sharing these discoveries with you. And I think that's what makes it such a profoundly beautiful experience, that you feel a real privilege sometimes to be in the room with these people and their passion and their knowledge and their all of these things. I mean, we could keep going on about this, but I think it's essential, because as you say, otherwise just plug your phone in, find the playlist, come back in 3 hours, and but it's not elitist either. And I mean, and from a global perspective, people are passionate about collecting and hearing new sounds, and it's it's essential. Maybe it's something that we might sort of move into. I want to ask you about how, because you have lots of different things going on, how has lockdown affected what you're doing? Because I'm guessing you haven't played out for a little while. So
no, I haven't. So I've just been keeping busy with my radio shows, and I've done a few guest mixes for various radio stations and groups around the world. There's this great one that I DJ'd at in London in November last year called Wanita, which is means woman in Indonesian, and it's all female fronted artists and female DJs, female identifying DJs. And so it was really nice to be a part of that. And I did a guest mix for a Spanish radio show. Live streams have been kicking off a little. I've been not dabbling too much in those.
I was going to ask about that, because that's become one of, not controversial, but that has become one of the defining moments of the lockdown for the soul community. Do you or don't you live stream, especially on something like Facebook, which really doesn't want you to? I mean, how has
Are you still a DJ?
Yeah, exactly. Please hold. Yeah. So how has, I mean, have you been, presumably you've been asked to do a lot of live streaming or get involved in a lot of things. What's your stance on it? I mean, not in a critical sense, but is it something that appeals? Is it too much? What do you think of it?
Well, for me, I did one for 2020, which is a Spanish night. It's an annual event, but they weren't able to go ahead, and it was incredible. I was DJing alongside Rob Bailey, who is an English collector and DJ. Just really cool. And one of the reasons why I signed up for that one was because you could play a lot more alternative, quirky things, and they would be welcomed. And it's like the range of music that was played was just incredible and really interesting and exciting. So I did do that one, but for me, I mean, I just prefer to play with real live humans. But that being said, I've actually loved watching and listening to them around the world, because I get to attend gigs that I'd never usually get to attend. And for me, one of the most fascinating things, again, it comes down to the passion of learning new music and hearing new sounds, is hearing each area's unique sound. Every city has its own style. And now I've been able to listen to that around the world from my lounge room.
It's interesting. I mean, there was the double cooking thing on last night on Facebook, and one of their challenges that they were attempting to do was to play stuff that's so obscure that Facebook couldn't block it because it wouldn't recognize it. And it's that battle. It's not quite, well, it is censorship in some ways. I mean, it's at the start of the lockdown, everybody did it. And I think there was a moment at which people would be like, I can't watch anymore, because it's not the DJ's fault, but like the tech is hard.
The sound qualities weren't all there. The muting was rife. So I've loved attending them. I've loved seeing my friends around the world DJ. But for me, I've just been busy with my radio shows. That being said, I do have an online gig coming up.
Tell us, please. Come on, we can advertise it.
On the 24th of July, it's Green Slopes a Go-Go. It's the campaign launch of my friend for the Greens Party in Australia.
Oh, lovely.
So
and where will that be? Where can people find that?
That's online, Facebook, Green Slopes a Go-Go, or you can go onto my Facebook page at dj.honey.vinyl45s. I'll be promoting it.
Fabulous. And all of these links will be in the description for this episode as well. So if you're looking for DJ Honey's Mixcloud and all of the things we've talked about, I'll put them all down in the description so everybody who's watching this can come and find you. I'm going to bring you onto your third record and ask you what your third record is, because I feel that we've covered so much ground that it's been really fascinating, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk about your third choice and what it is.
Okay, so for my third record, I thought I would pay homage to the country I live in now, and because since moving here, I've started collecting a lot of 60s Asian pop is the genre it's called, or hala hala. So this record is by Betty Chung, I Want Action.
Now, I don't know that, but I know that this is a massive genre that's been around for a long, long time, hasn't it? And is still an integral part of the scene, I'm guessing.
So here in Singapore, there are a lot more Asian artists played. I mean, it makes sense, right? A lot more Asian artists played than 50s, 60s American artists. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me to move here. And, you know, whenever I travel to a new country, I always try and pick up some records from that country from the 60s, just to get their sound. And you also learn a lot about what was going on at the time and just how different each country's lives were compared to ours, I suppose. And so moving here, I mean, it's been amazing music-wise. So surprisingly amazing. I have been introduced to many, many artists and such a cool scene. So back in the 60s in Singapore, the music scene was thriving. Arts, culture, everything was going off. They had the influences of British and American soldiers here. They'd newly gained independence, and so everything was feeling groovy. I suppose it was just such a swinging time. There's an area called Bugis Junction, Bugis area, and there they had these open markets and live bands and prostitutes and a trans community there, but they were all coexisting and partying together, and it just sounds amazing. But then towards the late 60s, the government really clamped down on live performances and all of that hedonistic behavior, I suppose.
Down with that sort of thing, yes.
And up with the economy.
Yes.
Which they really did, like, to their credit, they really succeeded and became this economic powerhouse and financial hub. But to the detriment of arts and culture. I mean, it's slowly coming back now, but they've just lost a generation or two of that growth. So in that era, there was artists from Hong Kong, such as Betty Chung, Hong Kong, China, coming to Singapore to perform, and also Malaysia. So since moving here, I've started collecting a lot of those artists, and through collecting them, I've been given the opportunity to DJ at this Malay festival called the Gala Laga Festival, where I played 100% 60s Malay records. And then I also have this, well, pre-COVID, I had this live radio show in Chinatown called for Rediffusion Radio, which is an iconic radio station here in Singapore. All the apparently it was in every household back in the 50s and 60s in Singapore, amongst Chinese Singaporeans, and a lot of these artists would perform live on that radio station. So now I get to do an hour set of 100% 60s Chinese records, and they're just really groovy. And this record in particular, the reason why I included this in today's show was because this wouldn't go astray on a UK Northern Soul dance floor. It's got that kind of UK sound, like Blue-Eyed Soul-y sound. Like Lynn Randall's Stranger in My Arms. It's very similar to that kind of thing. And I mean, the lyrics again are just amazing. It's called I Want Action, and it's all about her telling this guy to stop his talk with his empty words and start, you know,
put his money where his mouth is.
Amazing. There's so many amazing artists that have come out of Singapore.
It's an area that I'm not that familiar with. I would love to, and I'm hoping, because certainly what I'm going to do once we've stopped talking is I'm going to go off and start looking at these things, because I'm endlessly fascinated about new avenues to explore. This is why I love talking to people like yourself, because you bring me into a space where I haven't been before. Then I start thinking, okay, let's have a look, and then I get lost in Discogs, and then I kind of disappear down that rabbit hole. But look, do you know what I'm going to say? I'm just going to say that this has been a fabulous, really genuinely enjoyable chance to chat with you. We've only scratched the surface, but I don't want to sort of keep you here for the rest of the evening, because it'll be pitch black by the time we finish.
But the stone behind me will stare.
Exactly, and everybody will just be staring at an empty screen. But I'm just going to say, DJ Honey, thank you so much for coming on the show. Your kind of brand of personal defiance, I think, in 2020 is crucial to anybody who understands anything about cultural expression, about personal choice. I mean, if you look globally, I think defiance is a key word. And it's been so inspiring listening to you talking about where you started off and then where you are. I'm just going to say thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for including me and, going to all avenues of the globe to interview these people and include them on your show. So thank you. Thanks. I'm so grateful.
It's been a real pleasure, and we'll have you back on the show sometime in the future where you can do a Malay pop special or something like that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Yeah.
Listen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.